Back in April, I started this channel with one proposition: one video essay a month. Yeah, that kind of fell through rather quickly, didn't it? Perfect. As much as I like to think there were external reasons, limited time, or something physically keeping me from delivering the essays as scheduled, truth is, there wasn't. I was just unable to find new ideas, and for those that I did find, I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to write about said idea. At the end of May, when I lost my deadline for the channel, it became official. I was having a severe case of the dreaded writer's block. After missing my self-imposed deadline, I decided to just relax and go back to playing my games without taking notes or thinking of video ideas. Now, nearly 2 months later, I played 2 games that finally inspired me to get up and write a script: Forgotten Fields and the Beginner's Guide. After having played both of these games, I'm still uncertain if I have found an answer to the issue that plagues me and countless other writers around the world. But I did walk out from these games with a new perspective on it, one that I wish to share with all of you. So, without further ado, this is what gaming has taught me about writer's block. Quick warning, this video will contain spoilers for both of these games. If you have not played them and wish to do so, please go ahead before watching the video. They are pretty short experiences. So, every person has a different creative process. Some people need to read in order to get ideas, and must be listening to music in order to be able to write. Others just effortlessly do both things. Another group, one which I am part of, has yet to figure out what exactly works for them. Whether it relates to having ideas or having the desire and ability to sit down and write, there is no one formula that works for everyone. This is the reason why perhaps the games covered in this essay have a similar yet vastly different thematic that leads into the introspection heard here. An introspection that may or may not be useful to us as, like I said, each person has their own creative process. Before we can keep going though, a brief summary of both games is needed. Forgotten Fields is a game about a writer, Sid, who is facing writer's block. He is in his late 20s and an already established author with 1 book under his belt. The story takes place 3 years after the release of the first book. It is the day of the deadline for him to submit a new book summary/idea in order to receive a grant. Unable to write though, he decides to go to a dinner at his old house with his mom and friends and hopefully gain some new ideas along the way. As for the Beginner's Guide, it is a walking simulator. In it, one of the creators of the Stanley Parable, Davey, invites you to join him as he walks you through a collection of games by a friend of his named Coda. Through the journey, you see Coda's creations and hear Davey explain what he thinks they mean. His ultimate goal with this is to get Coda to start creating again, as he suddenly stopped for seemingly no reason. Both of these games offer very valuable perspectives within the thematic. In Forgotten Fields, we have the author's perspective. We see and play what the character's thinking, struggling with, and we even get to see his inner voice. On the Beginner's Guide, however, we are an outsider looking in. We get to see Coda's work not for what it means to him, but rather for what it means to his friend and fan, Davey. The reason why these perspectives are both very valuable is that they are 2 of the sides of this incredible dice that is the creative process. Dealing with your reality or expectations and dealing with other people's expectations. In Forgotten Fields, we first and foremost see the struggles of a writer dealing with what he expects of himself. His first book, written 3 years prior to the events of the game, was incredibly easy to write, and the words just flowed from his fingers to the virtual paper on his computer. The book was a hit, and he became an accomplished author, one that simply wasn't able to sit down and write the second book, even 3 years later. It was a massive case of writer's block, brought on by two main reasons, in my interpretation. The first was the fact that he had stopped going out, seeing his friends, reading, and just sort of withdrew from the world. For him and for many people, going out and living new experiences was key to unlocking his creativity. The second reason, and perhaps the main one I wish to talk about, is that he simply expected too much of himself and his writing. Not many people know this, but back when I was a teenager, writing was the one thing I loved doing the most. Off the top of my head, I can recall quite a few fanfics and original stories that went on for dozens of chapters each. This is something I loved to do, something that made the hours on the clock go by as if they were mere seconds. It was something that made me happy. And then I stopped. Years went by with barely a word written down every month. Hell, make that every semester for most years. I still wrote for university and work, but that was more or less it. To this day, that mostly remains the case. Since I stopped, a common thought that I find myself going back to is the why and how. Why did I stop? How do I go back to being that kid who was bursting at the seams of creativity and a desire to bring to life worlds full of wonder and magic? In my mind, my current process needs to be what it once was. It needs to be exactly as fun and effortless as back then, else there's no point. For a long time, that was the case for the Forgotten Fields protagonist too. He longed for those days 3 years prior when he could easily write his book, when he was happier, carefree, and felt so strongly about his work that he couldn't even think about resting from it. Perhaps this is why I identified myself with the protagonist. We both longed for a time long past, wishing desperately to go back. But time marches ever onwards, and it doesn't stop for anyone, leaving me, Sid, and countless others lost. And that is why it hit me like a truck when Sid's ex-girlfriend mentioned that perhaps he should stop trying to recapture the magic of the past and try to look for different types of magic in his new reality. She even used the relationship as an example. She was left broken after it, convinced she would never love anyone like she loved Sid. And she didn't. Instead, she found a person that she loved for completely different reasons, in a completely different but just as valid way. Something that she could only do after accepting that she needed to let the past go. And that's what got me. I've been so stuck lamenting the absence of that excited teenager that just wanted to write that I never stopped to consider that perhaps I could make a whole different but just as favorable reality. The Beginner's Guide, on the other hand, brings many other elements to the table, but I'd like to focus on how it explores expectations set by others. Now, I am aware that the Beginner's Guide has a rather abstract ending. Some say that Coda and Davy are one and the same, while others say that Coda is definitely a different person or doesn't even exist. I'm not gonna enter the merits of which interpretation I think is correct. For the sake of this essay, I will interpret the events in their literal sense as spoken. Throughout the second half of the game, Davy interprets Coda as being potentially depressed, spiraling into an abyss that he would no longer be able to climb out of by himself. His games were guessing to Davy in a more sporadic and rare manner, And those that did make it to Davy had thematics such as Coda no longer enjoying creating and finding out why an idea machine stopped working. At the end of the game, however, we find messages that Coda left for Davy. In them, Coda expresses that Davy's obsession with his games left him burnt out and unable to keep going. He wasn't even depressed, acknowledging that low points, writer's blocks, and my interpretation are just part of the process. Something that Davy failed to see because he needed those games to feel good, and as such, became desperate when they stopped coming. If taken literally, the journey we go through in the beginner's guide does a good job of showing us just how much the expectations of others can influence our work. For Coda, Davy's constant necessity for more games was enough to make him stop making them, as he was doing so just for fun and only sharing with Davy. For me, it's a bit more complicated than that. Parts of the expectations are my own, obviously, but since I started posting my reviews and videos to the internet, I definitely feel some of the pressure of doing so. I'm constantly asking myself if I'm doing well, if something will be well received, if I will get even a single comment, if anyone's gonna take anything the wrong way, amongst other pointless questions. Furthermore, I know from questions that I get about it that people enjoy my content. While this is great, it also adds to the pressure as I feel I can't let them down. The beginner's guide does not offer a solution to this issue in the manner that Forgotten Fields does, but it does serve as a cautionary tale to just how bad dealing with others' expectations can be. At the end of the day, I think it's a matter of training an I don't care mindset, in which you do your creative work for yourself and let the results be whatever they may be. A friend of mine recently told me that my writing is a delight to see, as it comes from my heart. Doing it for others, thinking about what they may or may not enjoy, inhibits the heart, as suddenly I'm thinking about what I'm writing instead of feeling it. It's not easy to just turn off from thinking about outside expectations, but I haven't lost hope. I know I can get there, and so can you, if you so desire. I might revisit the theme later for more musings on the subject, as it is very dear to me. For now, however, I will leave you with both the thoughts I presented and a question. How do you deal with writer's block? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and I will catch you hopefully on the next one. Goodbye and good luck on your own creative processes.